Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. All right. We're on. We are live. We have a very special guest today. Someone I always wanted to talk with and always wanted to interview, and had this opportunity to actually bring him to you guys. And it's one and only Scott Robertson. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going well. Thanks. Just
Um,
we'll see if I have any voice left. I just recorded a 3 hours of drawing tutorials on Gumroad today.
oh, okay.
It's actually exporting as we speak. So
Damn.
yeah, I just started that like
That's
a week.
cool. Yeah, I've just noticed that you started doing those, and that's pretty cool. How's that experience for you? I mean, you've been doing tutorials and classes. You've been teaching in like for like forever, right? Oh, little Skype problems there. Yeah, guys. Let's hold on here for a second. We're having little connection problems here with Scott. He got a new internet, so it might take a while. Let me try to reconnect to him. Um, Things that happen when you have internet. um, yeah, I think we disconnected. Anyways, I might just start talking a little bit in the meantime. Oh,
Hey, I'm
here we
back.
go.
Sorry about that. You know what? It's this new Wi-Fi. It just like made a beep. It's this new fiber or optic cable, and it just like beeped and cut me off, and then it booted me back up. So obviously not quite working well yet.
Yeah. So if you just had your new internet installed, right?
Yeah, like
The
about an hour ago. So it's obviously it just kicked me off and then it booted right back up. So I have to call them tomorrow, I guess.
yeah.
Technology.
Yeah, just call them like, well, I paid so much money and you're
Uh,
just doing a
they'll
crap
get it.
job.
We'll get it fixed. It's better than what I had before. So
You're at your studio right now, right? Is
yeah,
that
I'm at my
correct?
studio.
Is it in Culver City?
Yep, Culver City.
Oh,
We've
that's
been
pretty
here
close.
for. I've had this space. Oh man, I've had it since almost. I've had it almost 20 years.
Wow.
I know.
Wow, that's actually longer than I've been in this industry.
Yeah. So yeah, Neville Page and I, we got this space first back in right after we came back from Art Center Switzerland from teaching there for a couple of years,
Uh-huh.
and we got this in '96, and then we expanded out. It was, I think in '97 is when we got it. So we're coming up on 20 years. So
Nice. Nice. That's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I've been in this industry since 2003, so you've been probably already, rocking there for the longest while. I would actually be curious to hear a little bit about you and what actually got you into being an artist. I know your father was an
yeah,
artist, right?
yes, it was. Yeah,
And because I think you've shared that information. I remember listening to you talking with Ash Thorpe on Collective Podcast. That was one of
yeah.
the more inspiring podcasts out there that I've been
Thanks.
listening to. And I've been following you and all of the badasses in this industry. James Klein, you, Neville Page, Ryan Church. I remember that it was like almost like a resurgence of amazing concept art that just started to appear on CG Society, or back then it was called
Yeah,
CG Talk, and the huge speed painting thread on CG forums. It was always like a bunch of really professional artists that I was always admiring. Like, oh damn, like that's one of the reasons why I want to be concept artist, and why I want to work
all
in
us
concept
old
art.
guys now. So, um, yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time. You know, when I graduated Arts Center in 1990, there really was no entertainment industry to
Mm-hmm.
speak of, and it was ours was kind of the first class in 1990 that had graduates actually go out and try to work full time in the entertainment industry. At that time, there was no concept art for video games because it was, it was so pixelated. Nobody on the concept art side who had those skills was at all interested in working in entertainment because the final product was so, uninspiring. But Nick Pugh was really like the first guy, one of the first guys in 1990 around that time
Mm-hmm.
to go out and try to work full time in entertainment instead of doing transportation design or product design. And then other people started to follow. So the only jobs at that time were working for an effects house. So he went to work for Rhythm and Hughes. Um, and then you could try to work on movies, but most movies didn't even, they didn't have big art departments really. So it was not like a job you could go out and find. So it was
Right.
tough. But then after that, as video games started to come online and get, higher resolution, then there was the need for entire worlds to be created.
Yeah, that's true. I think video game stuff started to pop up just around the time I was joining the industry, which was 2003, 2004, a little earlier than that actually, but
Yep.
in a more professional way, it was, yeah, like around that time where it was this shift, which I was talking about earlier, from what it was called old gen, like old generation video games,
Uh-huh.
to new generation video games, where studio sizes all of a sudden became like quadrupled in terms of how many horsepower they needed, like how many people they needed to be in the studio, how many artists they needed, programmers, animators, whatnot. Um, a lot of people were assigning next gen to the fact that, okay, next gen is when you start using real time lighting and normal maps. And I think Epic Games was coming up with Gears of War during that time, and that was like a prime example of what the next gen is. Crytek came up with Far Cry, which was using that next gen technology as well. Because you could tell, like the old gen games, like let's say Half-Life 2 is a perfect example of an old generation game, which doesn't use any normal maps and doesn't use like real-time lighting. It's all like baked lighting, light maps, and stuff like that, which requires way less resources, but looks realistic. But it's not as interactive in terms of how things can change with the lighting and how lighting is affecting um, the player experience. Versus the new gen, you could like the character could cast shadows and stuff like that. And Doom was another example for that. But I remember it clearly because on that time I was working for People Can Fly, and that was 20 people. That was only 20 people in the studio. And then once they started shifting to next gen, they needed like, oh, we're gonna need like 100
Yeah,
in
yeah.
in
We
order
gotta,
to make it
we gotta remember,
happen.
like when I graduated from Art Center, we didn't work on computers. So we did some word processing on computers. Like we put our portfolio together a little bit on a computer. That was like just when um, Photoshop was just showing up,
Right.
just being invented, and it was like even in '95, I think I was working on Photoshop 3 or Photoshop 2. So, it was really there was no digital artwork. So we used to do everything by hand.
That's impressive.
So we all just sort of taught ourselves the digital tools along the way.
Yeah. Well, I personally consider myself to be sort of like a digital kid, digital artist, sort of like era.
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely that era. I'm not. I just turned 50 in June, and so I'm of the old school era,
Yeah,
um,
you're
where that like
absolutely old school, but
yeah, the digital for us is still like magic.
yeah, that's true. I mean, it's like when I'm looking at some of the sketches that you've been doing, some of the work that you do in pencils, you just started to release those amazing books. I always been recommending them, how to draw and how to render.
Oh,
Those
thanks.
are those are freaking awesome, dude.
Yeah, those burned
When I
me out a
was
little bit. It was
Oh, I
really
can
hard work.
imagine. I can imagine it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
If for those who haven't never like been teaching and trying to teach, is it's one thing to know how to do things, and then the other to explain how those things are done. Because then you have to go really much deeper than you're really thinking you need to in order to explain everything in the right
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And, I think it's always what I found starting, I started teaching in '98
Uh huh.
in Europe. And if you ever want to fully understand something, just try and teach it to someone else.
Yeah, I would
And,
agree.
and it forces you to go do so much more research than you would ever do on your own, to just create your own artwork. So there's a whole nother level there of understanding that teaching forces you to go sort of figure out.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because when I started teaching, and that's kind of interesting thing, especially in regards to Gumroad, is you can tell who's really paying attention to, like, all right, this is what I want to teach versus I just want to show how I do stuff and I don't really care whether you learn
Yeah,
something out of it or not. There's a huge the discrepancy between both. I would say, um, and what I've noticed is that I remember when Gumroads, or not Gumroads actually, Gnomon videos and Gnomon DVDs were out there. That was probably the only professional source I really had a
yeah,
opportunity to look at, because back in 2004 there was no YouTube.
yes,
You couldn't
exactly.
find anything for free like right now. But I remember that there were like bunch of DVDs that you would watch and like, damn, I'm learning a lot, because it's not only just like a technique of your favorite artist,
Uh-huh.
and he's just drawing and like, oh, I'm just putting lines here and then drawing lines there, and then eventually turns out to be this.
Right.
Whereas, for instance, when I watched your rendering videos, how deep into a detail of why the light behaves in a specific way and why you're shading
Yeah, that just came
elements in a
from
very
experience
specific.
of teaching it for so many years before
Right.
doing those DVDs. And we kind of have always had those sort of two categories of DVDs when I was helping to co-produce those.
Mm-hmm.
We would always have artists that could teach, right? And then we
Uh-huh.
have artists that could do. And the
Right.
artists that could do would be almost like an over-the-shoulder. Watch them. You could almost just play music because they weren't going to say anything. Right? Um, or you could have the teachers who were really great teachers, and they maybe they weren't maybe even as good as the guys that could do it really well, but they could teach it to other people. So there's a totally different kind of demo and drawing that comes out of trying to explain it to
Mm-hmm.
someone versus trying to show it to someone.
That's true. That's true. I mean, when you are just doing demo for the sake of doing demo, then you're basically doing something that you might like to do,
Yeah.
versus when you're teaching a specific subject matter, then you're crafting everything that you're doing towards that specific subject. And
Well, you know what happens? It's really interesting because you do a demo, and if you do what you like to do, it's going to turn out, it's going to start too advanced usually for the audience.
yeah.
And typically, what happens is people won't understand what you're doing. So as soon as somebody asks a question, then you realize where you need to start from.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, it becomes quite quickly. It always turns into a discussion about fundamentals. And the demo you get out of doing fundamentals, for your demo is usually not the sexiest thing.
Nope.
And so they look like the end result of the thing you're showing in a demo tends to be really, simplified and something you're not very proud of or interested in, but it could have amazing educational content in the way that you describe it as you're doing it.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's so bizarre. I never put any weight or stress on myself about what a demo looks like, because it's all about what you're saying when you're doing it and what you're pointing out specifically. So it's a lot of times it looks like scribbles and diagrams and things, but in the moment, it clearly communicates the point you're trying to make.
That's true. Yeah, there's something about teaching and finding out the right balance, like what is advanced and what isn't. And that's something I was really always curious about, because, you know, right now, I don't know, 13, 14 years in the industry, working in this and doing work, and, you know, the experiences that I've gathered over time, and things I've learned by watching everyone else doing it, and sort of like kind of learning it myself. I'm personally not, you know, taught in any kinds of art school, because I just couldn't afford to go to one. So everything I've learned was pretty much, oh, this is what I saw on internet, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
try to make a bit better version of it. Um, but there was always something interesting about finding the balance of what is the beginner sort of like basic level and what is the foundation and what is more professional? Because that's very subjective, right?
Well, I mean, some things are subjective. I think styling and things like that are more objective or subjective. I don't know that I understand your question exactly.
I guess what I mean is like well, I don't think I don't think I phrased it in as a part of a question. Really,
Yeah.
I just kind of stopped there awkwardly. No, what I think what I meant is is just when I'm teaching or when you're teaching in general, unless you build your experience through doing this for a longer time, you're thinking that some whatever you're doing is it might be easy for a student, and you like you said, when you're doing a demo of something that's cool, um, you might think it's an easy thing to do because you've been doing this for a longer
Yes, yes,
time, and
yes.
then
Yeah,
and then the student's like, but wait, like how do you come up with perspective in the first place?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
That's what I meant when you're doing a demo and somebody asks a question, you very quickly realize that your demo needs to be way slowed down, simplified, back to the basics. Um,
yeah,
and it's just over and over and over again. You find out that you really need to teach, people how to draw first before anything else. So yeah, it's tricky.
it
Um,
is. It
I,
is.
I always err on the side of uh, simplifying as much as I possibly can and trying to explain absolutely everything, which means that demos go slower. They're not as sexy, but you know, somebody might actually learn something.
Right.
So
Right.
I
That's
always
true.
err on that side.
In your experience, because I think one of the epiphanies that I've been having so far when teaching is there is there's a threshold of students that really care and
Yes.
they wanna do something with it, and then there's another threshold of students that they just kind of want to do it because they like your work, and then there's also a bunch of students that are just taking the class because they feel like they can impress friends or just it's like a hobby and stuff like that. What I've always noticed is that there's only a small percentage of students that really take things super seriously and then they move forward. And it's kind of a struggle to point that out. Like if you want to be in this industry, in whether it's video games, entertainment in general, like it takes a lot of effort.
Yes.
Um, and I don't think a lot of students understand that. I'm curious what are your experiences with that, because you have vast more experiences with with
Yeah. I
students than
mean,
I do. So
it's probably very much the same. Although I will say, since I've taught in a lot of dedicated, university level um, classrooms,
hmm
that a lot of students there are fully committed. So
right,
you don't, and they're all like-minded people that are fully committed to building a profession, and they're signed up to learn this for 4 years, sort of thing. So they're in
gotcha.
for the long haul. They're fully dedicated. It's more like, say, graduate level education, um, which makes it I don't have to deal with. It's not open to the general public, let's say.
Right,
So that is usually not an issue when it comes to teaching at a college or university. But when you're trying to teach, let's say, a workshop that's open to the general public, or you're answering questions via YouTube, that sort of thing,
hmm
it's really, just to your point, it's all over the place, which is totally to be expected, I think.
yeah,
You know,
that's true.
there are people just like discovering that this is an actual job or a discipline that they could do, for the very first time. So a lot of times you get questions from those people that are early in their, research, let's say, of understanding that it's even a job in the first place. So, yeah, I think it, it it's you know, the thing that I always hear from professionals, not all of them, of course, but when they're teaching people, they'll be like, "Oh, don't show them all that," because I don't, they're afraid they're going to take their job or something. It's be like, listen, this information's been out for a long
I've
time.
heard that too many
How
times.
many how many people are actually really good?
Yeah,
There's very few. Even with all the free information, all the Gnomon DVDs, and all the books, and all the schools that are now going, you still jump onto someplace like ArtStation, and you still can't find good design, you know? So you find amazing illustration, but you can't find really interesting designs.
Yeah, that's something I've been saying a lot too. It's like it's very easy to call yourself designer, just like write it down. Oh, I'm a designer,
Yeah.
um, and then actually be a designer. For the longest time, I personally considered myself illustrator, and not really more than that because illustration is it's so much easier to do compared to design. I think design is
I don't know. I
something
think it's tough. I mean, I think it's just different. I think it's a different skill set. It's a different mindset. Like,
right.
because I've never considered myself an illustrator. So no, if, and I have a hard time thinking about
That's
illustrating
interesting.
style because it's not where my mindset always goes, and I can't get motivated to
Ah,
do
I see.
illustration. I just don't, unless it's something, you know, with some original content that has some parameters and some problems to solve.
Hmm.
On the design side, I have a hard time getting motivated.
But don't you think it's less mentally taxing, let's put it this way, to illustrate versus design?
It's just different, I think. I don't
Because
know
I
that
was,
it's just different. I mean, I think they're both fully engaging. So
hmm,
if you are fully immersed into your discipline, like if you're an illustrator and you're doing that to a really high level and you're considering every mark in your composition and the story you're trying to tell and the lighting and the material indication, I think you're fully immersed. Um, and same goes on the design side. I think doing mediocre illustration is easier.
yeah,
Uh,
I think
but I
that's
think
it.
doing good illustration is the same.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view I've never considered actually, because there's something about illustration itself, which you discover over time and experience, is that yeah, as you said, the mediocre stuff it's super easy to do, or it's much easier to learn, um, just because it's just like a couple of principles that you sort of need to remember and then
Mm-hmm.
replicate reality, basically. Which I always thought is it's easier. The reason I'm thinking like why illustration is easier because in design there's design principles and functionality of the things that exist and function in the world that you need to have a knowledge of.
Yes.
So in terms of when you want to consider yourself a designer and actually design things, apart from just being an artist, you have to know a lot more outside of what art is. You have
Yeah,
to know the
you need
function of
definitely
things.
you need some grounding in engineering and how things work for sure.
Yeah,
But
and
good illustrators traditionally in the past, good illustrators had that same knowledge. Um, I think it's definitely changed
hmm,
with digital tools. To be honest, I think there's old illustrators, they had to know how things worked the
yeah,
same as the designers, um, and they had to draw all that stuff by hand, and so there was no cut and paste, right? There
no
was
photo bashing.
no photo bashing, that didn't exist, and so when they wanted to draw something, they had to actually go out and research it. So I think old illustration was, when it was done by hand, was just as engaging and just as deep on the research side of how things worked. Whereas nowadays, oh my, it's like the amount of photo bashing that and completely unrealistic, nonsensical mechanical things you see online is just laughable.
Yeah,
And then on top of that, material indication. The level of material indication, what I mean by that is being able to properly do reflections
hmm,
is also sort of like a lost art in the illustration world.
yeah, that's true. There's a lot of things to consider when you're illustrating, which comes down to lighting and materials. I believe like you cannot create anything realistic unless you really understand how lighting works and
Yeah.
how materials work, no matter whether you use photos or not.
Yeah.
Um, I would say having a little bit of experience with 3D and just knowing how 3D engines work with materials, just to see like, okay, this is what reflections do, this
Yeah,
is what
exactly.
Fresnel is.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think it's like hugely helpful now if you have some 3D rendering knowledge, um, and how you have to set up all of
Yeah,
that stuff and where you have to put the lights to get the reflection where you want it to be, that sort of thing.
I agree. It's
Hugely
like
beneficial.
yeah, because it kind of gets you to understand and realize that Huh. Actually, everything that we see in the world, everything that exists, reflects,
Yeah,
has a reflection to it. Even your genes, even though you think that they are not, but they do reflect light
yeah,
in
it's
a very
really
small
hard.
matter. But
Yeah, it's really, really hard to find a truly matte surface.
yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, scientists just came up with this super black material that doesn't have any reflections whatsoever.
Yeah,
That would be probably the only case in existence that we observe. But I agree. Yeah, like having a little bit of knowledge in 3D definitely helps. What I've noticed is that much like the sort of traditional drawing kind of went away and it's not really there anymore in entertainment industry, it's sort of slowly but surely moving towards 3D as well. Would you think so?
yeah, I think so. I think that what I've seen is, and I know in my own work, my own pipeline as well, um, I think that still there's nothing faster for me as far as coming up with my initial ideas.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing faster than just scribbling thumbnails only for myself that I would not show to an art director or even other team members. For me, that's still the fastest way to think is writing and
Mm-hmm.
scribbling some ideas and then jump into 3D. And 3D for me has sort of taken the place of final tight line drawings.
Right.
So I kind of have this, and then a lot of times I'll take the rough model and then draw over the top of that. So even though you might be working digitally in Photoshop or something,
Mm-hmm.
when you're making design changes, you're really drawing, even though you're painting. You're really still using the perspective from the model. So you really are using all your drawing skills, even though you're painting over a model.
Yeah, and
So
that's where the foundation comes back to you.
exactly. So I think it's still there, especially when you're working in Photoshop. But the way you think about how to draw. Um, so, for instance, the way that I was taught how to draw and the way that I teach it to everyone is that you think of the object as being invisible and you draw through the whole thing, and much like doing a wireframe for a model. So, if you're used to thinking that way and that's the way you learned how to draw traditionally, and you
Mm-hmm.
jump into doing 3D models, the modeling becomes really second nature and very easy because it's just like how you draw. So,
Right.
and then vice versa. The more you build models, the more you inform your ability to visualize in 3 dimensions, and then the better you get at drawing. So I see the two as like totally complementary, um, model building and drawing. And it makes your drawing significantly better because you start to understand things in 3D space
Yeah, I agree.
versus shapes. Shapes won't, if you're thinking more on the illustration side and you're thinking really about shapes and not about volumes, shapes, I mean, in two dimensions. And as they just overlap each other and layer to make an image, then that's not really going to help you model.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. For me, is like because I haven't again like I didn't have any um, academic sort of start where all right, this is where you should learn. This is the foundation that you should master before you even jump into other things. For me, actually starting to learn 3D is what made a big difference because I realized like how crappy I am in finding out shapes in 3 dimensions
Uh huh.
and how important it is to actually understand design language and shapes and
Yeah.
perspective in general because even though 3D by itself is providing you with that with those tools of perspective is already there by default,
Right.
um, but just designing things in 3 dimensions so that they look good no matter from which direction you look at
Yeah.
made me to look and observe the way I paint in completely different way because now all of a sudden instead of just thinking in flat surfaces, all
Yes.
right, this is my bushes, this is the tree, and this is whatever that is. Suddenly started to deconstruct the whatever I see into simple shapes. So if I
Yeah.
see a
That's the big.
building, that's a
That's the big
box.
jump. Yeah, that's the big jump to doing design work versus illustration.
Yeah,
There's a big jump there.
you start to understand those things, and it's pretty intense and kind of weird experience to learn in 3D, especially when you don't have that solid
the prior.
foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. The other thing we did, not only did we, in the old days, we drew and rendered everything by hand, but we also built all of our own models by hand.
right.
So everybody that of my era comes from having those hand skills of sculpting with automotive clay, building wood models, all of that sort of thing. So we used to build these really intense visual models of our creations. And so there was always a really clear path from doing your 2D drawings all the way through to a finished three-dimensional model.
Yeah,
So when digital came along, it's been a very easy jump to just get in and learn the tool to allow you to do what you already have in your head. So that's always been the easy part. The tough part's, staying up with all the new tools as they change,
yeah.
and some tools they're just not that smart. It's frustrating when software companies make changes that, didn't need to be made, right? Or the
Does
UI is
happen.
not as graceful as it should be.
So what are you using these days? Like, what are the
Um,
tools that are exciting you
yeah,
or exciting for you?
I'm not really excited by tools, to be honest. Um, they're just tools,
Right.
So I just don't. I used to get more into them, but now, um, to be honest, they're not really advancing much. Like in the last several years, I've seen UIs become, I have seen the UI become less graceful, more muddied, not simplified,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to do too much. There's a big disconnect, I think, between what the developers think the users want and what the users actually do want. And so I think a lot of things end up in software programs that are like they're completely missing some features, and other things are getting evolved and developed way down the line for tools you have no need for. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, for my pipeline, I pretty much do a little quick sketch just for myself
Mm-hmm.
with a few notes. Then I jump into Moto and I model. So that's always been my favorite, like, sub D poly modeling software.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take the model only as far as I need to. I set up my lighting and I run one render pass with all the layers turned on, everything, reflections and all of it. And then I just throw it into Photoshop and then start, painting over the top.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. That's
It's
pretty
really
cool.
simple.
Very simple. Yeah, I'm more obsessed about tools, but not in a way that they basically make work for me. It's more like they're removing obstacles and
Yeah.
providing new visual ways of creating things.
Well, I did a whole bunch of stuff like that with Moto with replicators, and that
Oh,
was
I
really
remember
fun at the
that.
time. It was really fun at the time because there were things that I couldn't do, and I did that for a footwear company. And it led to a shoe that went into production.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
and it came out of that whole experimentation phase of replicators and things like that. So, I mean, I definitely love to look at tools and figure out how they could be used in unintended ways. Like that was not ever a way that a replicator was meant to be used as a design iteration tool.
Yeah.
It was never meant to be used that way for styling purposes. But it seemed really straightforward, so it was fun to come up with that and find a way to use that. Same with like using photo booth and the mirroring tool, that sort of stuff. But nowadays, I don't know. I seem to be heading a little bit more back to the old school stuff.
Couldn't
Drawing.
blame you. I mean, there's
Yeah, it's
so
just
much
because I see.
saturation of the new tools.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anything super impressive. Like nothing's really inspired me lately online to really want to learn a tool.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a real lack of innovation with young concept artists and designers in thinking about their process.
Hmm.
I don't think very many people actually consider the way that they actually create things and try to improve upon that.
Right. Have you ever tried any of the drafting, like the product design tools, like CAD
Yeah, I
software?
used to do a lot of CAD stuff. When I first started, I worked in Alias Studio,
Okay,
Autodesk. I've done a bunch of that stuff, SolidWorks.
that's cool. Yeah, I've just recently, well, it's not actually, it's been almost 2 years now. Started working with Fusion 360, which is sort of like
Oh yeah,
take,
I've been seeing some stuff. I mean, it looks like basically a Boolean based,
yeah,
modeling.
it's that it's it's like SolidWorks, but more user friendly.
Yeah,
Probably less options too, but it kind of allows you to do a lot of things much faster, I would say. Um, but what I found impressive about it is the workflows that come out of it, um, which is basically the ability to build something within one software and
yeah,
then send out the file and have it printed directly from that file. So you're pretty much, by just doing that, you're removing quite a few steps from the production pipeline.
yeah. I do that out of Moto. I mean, I made a like a little that orb spaceship thing. I
Uh huh.
modeled all that in 56 parts. They all fit together. We had it 3D printed, so I kind of get that. It's not super precise in that you're not going to throw down holes of a certain bore diameter that are exactly perfect. Um,
Right.
but for looks like models, for like little presentation models and things like that, you can definitely do it in that tool.
I'm actually curious if you're sharing screen or if there's anything that you're showing up on your screen. Oh, there we go. Because I was almost sure that it locked itself.
If I
But
lose
yeah.
it on my Wi-Fi connect, it'll reestablish. So
Oh, okay. Now we can see it now. Perfect. I was showing some of the work that you do on my browser in the meantime. But yeah, so that's actually pretty cool. I so how like in Moto it would it be like whatever you create there you would be able to print it out or
yeah, it just has to be watertight.
oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that.
It's
Yeah,
just,
that's
I mean, it's just a poly model. So
yeah.
whether it's ZBrush or Moto or Fusion
Yeah, that's
360,
true. You can actually print sub D
yeah, it's the
models
same.
too. You, yeah, that's true.
I don't
It's a little
have the.
different with CAD.
I guess I don't have the ship there. I don't have much from Blast on there. I think it's probably on this blog thing. Are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, we
Okay,
do.
let me just zoom. Here's that replicator stuff with suits.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about those replicators because I remember when you started to post those. I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
And then I think you made like a tutorial how you're
yeah, a
actually
little
doing
bit.
it.
Yeah. What's
And
funny, there's an example of a software thing. The later versions of Moto wouldn't do that. So
what?
the earlier version, 601, would do that. And then later, they because nobody would use it for that. It was not meant to be used that way. It was the
Right.
symmetry part it wasn't doing. So I think it since has been fixed, but it's frustrating when tools you like,
Get
go
removed.
away.
Ah, that's a bummer.
That's the ship right there that I built in Moto.
That's cool.
Not this one. That's just straight Photoshop.
Hmm.
But that's the one. I don't know if I don't think there's a picture of it on here, but it's on the Industria Mechanica site.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what's frustrating.
Yeah, I remember because when you posted, I will tell you a funny story here. When you posted those images, I was like, damn, this is awesome. And I was always like curious how you did that. So I started experimenting with replicators myself
Mhm.
and more from like an illustrator point of view, which is basically I just gonna remove myself from trying to come up with something, original, but let's see if I can create an illustration or like a style frame out of it. So I posted few like very similar designs to what you've been doing, just putting it in a context of being in an actual environment
Uh,
and more rendered and with more attention to you know not just the tool and design and what came out of it in the raw, but more like how I can push it even further to make it look like it's like a, let's say frame from a film, right?
yeah, yeah. Do the paint over.
Yeah. And I posted that, and about a week later, I got a call from MPC, and that's what pretty much led me to work on the Sentinels for Days of Future Past
Uh
on
huh.
the X-Men, which was like, huh, I should probably send a thank you note to
Yeah, yeah. Should.
Scott. Well, now I have a chance to actually tell you that
Yeah.
live, so
I'm used to
you were
getting
one of
lots
the
of.
reasons.
That's okay. I'm used to getting lots of people good jobs.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're definitely contributed in a huge way for me landing that gig.
Yeah, I'm not really into those gigs. So I'm great. I think it's awesome. Other people get to do them.
Yeah, you work more in the industrial design, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really done that much, in reality, that much entertainment. I've never did it as a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
I have all the skill sets. I've been invited a lot of times to work on those things, but I have a great studio. I enjoy, working in my own space. So yeah, I was really into doing all the books more than anything because I got to do all the entertainment work, but I got to have full creative freedom.
Yeah, you're
So
not having a production designer
yeah,
sitting
so
next to
I,
you and
I
like,
got to be the production designer.
yeah,
So yeah, it's more fun for me to just do the same job but do it for myself, and then just publish it in a book,
yeah.
um, or teach it, to others and let them go do that work. So that was always fun. But yeah, nowadays, especially like the last 2.5 years, I'm doing mainstream industrial design work, um, really product design,
That's
and
cool.
I'm doing a bunch of product design that nobody has seen yet. So I'm on a top secret project for the last 2.5 years.
Wow. I wanna see that one day. Hope it comes out and
It will, it will. We're just, and the reason I'm doing these tutorials right now is that I have a little window of time while we're in our next, because it's for a startup company,
mm-hmm.
and we're in our next round of fundraising. And until that closes, I have a little window of time. And so I'm also doing this hot rod truck. And so my hot rod truck, of course, always needs money. So I was like, all right, what can I do that's, fun to do, people will enjoy, and I can make a little side money to help fund my truck. So
Yeah, how's the truck going? Because I saw you started building it. I remember you first posted renders
yeah, did some
and some
drawings.
sketches.
Yep, yep. The truck
I,
is good. Yeah,
I was always curious how much work it really is because I remember seeing Aaron Beck's Cuda, which is
yeah,
an amazing vehicle,
yeah. It's great.
and I was talking with him like, oh my god, it's so much work and so much attention to details he's putting into actually building that thing.
Yes, I
And
think his was a lot more work because although this year I did actually spend a lot of time on it. I was like 4 days a week on the truck, for about four months this year, early in the year.
so,
Um, so it is a lot of work.
right,
I'm working with a builder down in Corona, so they'll
okay.
do all the engine stuff. They're doing all the assembly, all the metal work.
I was
Um,
about to ask actually on that, so
yeah,
that's
I
cool.
mean, with exception to, I'm using water jet cutting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I'll do all the drawings. So I design all the aluminum parts, do all the drawings in Illustrator, and then take those vectors basically over to my water jet people, tell them the material I want, the thickness I want. They'll water jet it all. I'll bring it back into my own shop here. I'd hand clean it up because the water jetting gives you kind of a little serrated edge on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I hand file all that stuff, clean up all those parts. I do any counter boring here, router edges, that sort of stuff. So clean it up basically, and then I'll deliver it down to my builder with hopefully to the point where basically he just has to bolt it on. So it is a lot of work. Super fun though.
It's probably a lot of money involved too,
Yeah,
getting all those things
it's not
done.
the cheapest hobby. Um, but
It's
I sort of
rewarding
did it.
though.
The what?
It's rewarding though.
Yeah, it is rewarding. It's fun because it's like it's just big kit bashing, right? So if you're used to kit bashing in a 3D modeling program, it's the same thing because what I do a lot is go to the aerospace junkyards, of
Mm-hmm.
which there's not that many left in LA, but there's a couple. And so I go there and there's a couple of good hardware stores, and I go and I just search through the junkyard and I find cool stuff. And then
Right.
I take that and I figure out a place for it on the truck. Then I modify it, and it's just like full size kit bashing.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Just a little more labor intensive.
Yeah, it is more labor intensive and it's more expensive, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But I sort of did it because I had a big birthday this last June with my 50. And I was like, if I don't just get on this project, it's never going to happen. So
Yeah.
that was my kick in the butt, was to do it for myself, to do one big project. So I started, and I just, I we build on it as I have money, available, basically.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like your own internal deadline
No,
for?
not
Okay.
really. Because, the thing is with this project is I didn't want it to be stressful.
Right.
So I didn't want to self-impose a deadline, and I didn't want to try to take it to a certain show level, or I just wanted to, you know, do it when I had a little bit of, available money. I would throw it at the truck, do as much as I could on my own to save money,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's done when it's done. I'm not even tracking what I spend. I know it's a lot, but I'm not tracking it because I don't want to have it ruin the experience.
Yeah.
So
You just look at the bill towards the end. It's like,
no,
oh
I
my
can't.
God,
'Cause it's not.
I could buy a Ferrari for this.
Yeah, totally. But it's not what it's about. So
Yeah, that's true. It's the experience of building
yeah,
something and being proud of it, you
yeah.
know?
It's just that it's the process that I love.
Yeah.
So it's the research, of going to the junkyard and like picking through stuff and finding things that could work together in an interesting way. Um, and that's the part I'm really trying to enjoy. So I don't want the like banking side of it to ruin that for me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, you don't want to do that because otherwise
Yeah,
it's like, ah, what's the point?
I know. Then it gets frustrating, and then same with the deadlines. So
Yeah.
fortunately, my builder is super cool. So if I warn him ahead of time, a couple of months, that my budget might run out, he's like, okay. So then he knows ahead of time, to start his other projects, and then we just move
Mm-hmm.
it to the other side of his shop, and it's kind of in storage, and then
Right.
save money and do a couple of jobs, and then good to go again, and go after it for another couple months.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's probably the only way to do it
Yeah,
without
'cause
getting too
then
stressed
it
out.
stays fun.
Yeah, because
Otherwise,
you're not really doing it as a profession, you know. It's
no, no,
like,
no. It's
yeah,
definitely going to be advertising, for my design studio, but
of course.
and I'm documenting the whole process, putting it, on my Facebook photo album and sharing the build process and that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
Should do a
Um,
documentary about it. That'll be
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's too much effort to also film stuff,
Yeah, that's
um,
true.
but I definitely am going to have a great case study together because of all the photography we're taking and all
Mm-hmm.
the, all the write-ups I'm doing along the way. It'll be easy to go back and put together a really nice case study.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm curious how it's gonna turn out in the end. What it's gonna
I,
be, unless it's gonna turn out to be a project that you're constantly improving.
no, I
That's
don't
kind of cool
think
too.
it's. No, I definitely think it's going to have a completion date because I've already mentally moving on to my next project.
Mm, gotcha.
So, um, and the next project will be electric. So,
Oh,
yeah,
that's interesting. That's probably a totally different set of problems and obstacles to tackle and
it's easier
research.
actually.
It's easier?
Yeah, it's a lot easier because the
Okay.
drivetrain systems are so much easier with electric.
That's true. Because it's just the battery and then electrical,
Yeah,
which gonna have to have in a regular vehicle anyways.
yeah. I mean, it's just the power plant. It's so
Mm-hmm.
much smaller. It's so much easier to package. Um,
Hmm.
right now, I've been kicking around the idea because I always have this because I'm a car guy. I always have this like virtual garage
Mm-hmm.
of cars I'd love to hot rod someday.
Right.
So um, my latest is like Alfa Romeo GTV 2000, or 1600, but of that era, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Two door. It's a 2+2, but I have like some modifications already in mind, and then I want to make it electric. So that's one that I'm considering.
That's cool. That could turn out to be a really rad piece.
Yeah, it could be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the truck is. We have almost everything's made. Actually, we're just down to labor of assembly, but
Okay.
almost everything's designed. Almost everything's built. I have one big water jet job left to do, but everything is drawn up. So just waiting for money at this point.
Right. And then putting in work for details and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, all the details, everything. I've got even like a cool little dashboard clock. I bought all the gauges, like
Oh,
everything's
okay.
sitting there. It's all good to go. The seats, everything. But
Cool.
there's a lot of assembly. There's a lot of labor left.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but we
It's
have
not 3D where you're just like, oh, I just gotta put it together.
no.
No, it actually has to
Fortunately,
fit and everything. So
yeah. And we'll build it finished in its raw form, so it'll be all raw aluminum and steel. and fully drivable at that point. And then I'll probably keep it here at the studio, drive it for 3 or 4 months, and make my to-do list, do my final graphics, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll tear it down and do all the paint.
Oh, that's cool.
And all the paint and graphics will happen, at a later time.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Cool. Dude, it's been almost an hour that we've been talking, and
Yeah, it goes fast, doesn't it?
yeah, it goes extremely fast. It's almost like asks itself to be like, let's do 2 more hours, but I know we have limited time. I wanted to jump into some questions because there's
Yeah.
quite a bunch of them on
Yeah,
the
we're
live
just
chat.
rambling. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Let me start with the first one, which says, Scott, how do you handle the anxiety from planning and executing the production of personal projects? I want to make something original, but I keep changing the idea because I believe I cannot do it.
Yeah, that can be tough.
Oops.
So first, don't be so hard on yourself because it can be difficult. But two, you have to sort of separate yourself from your work. And it sounds easy to say, but it's incredibly difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sort of students learn at Art Center, is that the work that they produce is not a reflection of who they are as a person. It's a reflection of their work. It's not. So what I mean by that is that you can't take it personally. So,
Yeah.
and you have to fail along the way to advance your skill sets. And showing your failures to your peer group is one of the fastest ways to improve. So it gets really difficult because you're stuck. It's this like catch-22, right? If you show it to other people, they're going to have a critique. You're going to grow from that experience. But you don't necessarily want to hear the critique because it's not going to be all the time good.
It's not the
But you
pleasant
don't learn from all the
thing to do.
praise.
Yeah.
You learn from the critique, So I think you have to sort of separate yourself when you show your work to other people. Is you have to realize that you're showing your work. You're not showing, yourself as an individual.
Right.
And I think that's where artists get hung up a lot, because they have a real emotional connection to the art, and designers don't as much.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that designers see it as a business, and they see that the design is always done for other people. And artists a lot of times are doing the art for themselves. And so you make a very strong emotional connection to the things that you invent, right? And then when people give you a critique of it, you feel like they're giving a critique of you as an individual. But it's actually not the case. It's just your work, right?
Yeah.
Say it's just your work. I mean, you have to separate yourself from it. And you have to say, listen, this is the best I could do on that day with the amount of time I was given. And this was as original an idea as I could have at that time. That's totally fine. And if it fails, totally fine. You're going to move on and you're going to grow from the experience.
Yeah, there was this saying I heard, you win or you learn. Where it's, you just have to fail. Otherwise, you're not learning.
Yeah. And
you cannot always win.
You just have to grow a thick skin.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, it's something interesting. As I saw it more common in video games, or actually in film too, where people just get hung up on their ideas. Like, all right, I've painted this thing. I don't want to change it because I love it so much. But it doesn't fit the project.
That's called the IKEA effect. No, I'm serious. It's an actual thing.
Can you elaborate? Because that sounds funny. IKEA effect.
Yeah, you've never heard of it?
No.
Okay, what the IKEA effect is that, and this works, psychological thing that works with anything you invest time in, is that you go and you buy a piece of furniture, take it home, and IKEA, right, is all self-assembly. So you take home the flat pack piece of the bookshelves, you put it together, and you build it. Even if you build it poorly, and even if though you have extra parts left over, if when asked, does that bookshelf have more value because you put it together poorly versus the one that you could buy from a store already pre-assembled, which one has more value? And when asked that, everybody answers the one that they put together has more value, even though it wasn't done as well. And so what has scientists and behavioral people have figured out is that as you invest time into anything, you're becoming more emotionally connected to it, to a point that if somebody wants to change it or critique it, you're immediately opposed to the idea of change, and you're opposed to the idea of it being poorly done because you've invested your time. So
Makes sense.
you do artwork, right? An art director is asking you to do stuff all week, and you put in a lot of time and effort, and then at the end of the week they ask you to change it. Immediately you don't want to change it, even
How
though
many times that happens?
even
Always.
though it's not your money, right, being spent on the project. It's your job to change it, right? You're
Yes.
supposed to be a professional, right? You
Yeah.
still don't want to do it. And so it's human nature to not want to make that change. So once you realize that it's actually just hardwired into your psyche, then I think you're much more willing to totally pitch a week's worth of work when it's not right for the project.
Right. Makes sense. And I'll tell you what I found interesting, which relates to teaching actually, is the fact that when you teach and you really go deep into yourself to find out what do you want to expose to the students to be as most valuable thing as possible.
Yep.
What you also learn about yourself is that you're actually letting go of the things that you are comfortable with, and you're finding yourself in a place where you're sort of like exposing everything that you have to everyone for everyone to use, and in most cases people will just replicate that.
Yep.
And it kind of forces you to think about something new and something fresh and some new adventures to pursue, you know?
Yeah, I think it does. It helps to like get it all out there, right?
Yeah.
One, you open up headspace to think about something new, and two, you've sort of like shared it with everybody and it's done, and you're like, well,
It's time to move on.
Yeah, time to move on. I've already done that. What
Yeah.
else can I do?
Exactly. And it's a great parallel for professional work too. When, again, like you said, you're getting paid to do something, you better deliver, you know?
Yeah,
It's not your product.
Treat it as a job. I think you have to separate yourself from it, right?
Yeah.
It's the job you signed up to do. It's not your money they're spending. They have every right to change their mind every other day. And
Yeah.
that is the job. And if you have a hard time with that, you're in the wrong job.
The wrong business. You should be doing a
Or you're
gallery
just gonna be
shows.
unhappy the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So, and nobody wants to be that. So you just have to find a way to deal with it.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll tell you the easiest way to deal with it, because it's really a yes job, right? Doing entertainment design and being concept artist and designer inside a department for a production designer or director, you know, it is a yes job, and you should approach it that way. So it makes it much easier if you always have a little personal project going. For your artistic satisfaction happens via a personal project that you have full control over.
Yeah.
So if you keep a little sketchbook, you you sketch on your iPad, you know, maybe just on the weekends or evenings, whenever you can, you just sneak in a little bit of personal work. It makes the day job super easy by comparison, because you know that it's not your only outlet for creative satisfaction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it's again coming back to the original question, which is don't be afraid to fail, even if you're doing your personal thing. Because guess
totally.
what? It's you're doing it for yourself and you're for your own development, and treat it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, don't be too hard on yourself.
No, be patient and don't be too hard on yourself.
It's true. All right, let's jump into another one. That was a long answer.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's good.
A couple of other questions.
Probably capped on a few other questions too, I believe. But another one was I'm always looking for books where I can find a good one related with light and physics in understandable way. I guess to phrase it in a better way, it's like, do you know any books which explain the lighting and physics behind it in a way that an artist can understand?
There's only, I mean, in addition to what we shared in How to Render, which was very watered down into artists speak, let's say, on the physics side, I reference a book in that book called The Biology of Seeing. And if you want something really deep on how the brain is processing all of that stuff at a physics level, The Biology of Seeing is very good.
That's cool. I'll check that out.
I can't remember the woman's name as the author, but
Margaret Livingstone.
There you go. That's it.
There we go. I'm gonna pull it up.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, she's got the Mona Lisa on the cover.
Yep. It's right here.
That's a good,
I'll post a link
yeah, it's really good
after we're done.
on how the brain works and the physics of it all.
Yep, it's I'm gonna check it out. Actually, in regards to that question and sort
Yeah.
of like to elaborate that answer, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the audiobook or read the book called Mastery by Robert Greene. If you haven't had a chance, I'd highly recommend. It's one of the best books I've been reflecting on recently. It was
I'll look it up.
recommended by Vitali and Ash to me recently. I started reading. So it's audiobook is pretty long. It's actually 26 hours of audio. And what I love about this book is it's basically a dissection of most prolific and influential people that Earth have ever produced, and finding out what exactly they did and how they behaved and what they were pursuing in order to become the masters of what they do.
Uh-huh.
And one of the interesting stories that relate to what you talk about lighting and this, even reading the book, The Biology of Light, I believe, Biology of Seeing,
Yeah.
was Leonardo da Vinci and his story on how he became a person that we know as, almost like a magician of art and pretty much everything, science, everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there was an interesting story of how his brain would work and how he would look at art itself, which was completely different to anyone else during that era, which was, let's say he wanted to paint flowers, right? Um, the only the reason why he was really great at doing specific things like painting flowers or making angel wings to be probably the most beautiful thing during that era, like no one could paint angel wings like him, is because, like, for instance, when he was a kid, he was obsessed about plants. He was obsessed about biology of flowers,
Yeah.
seeing how they bloom, how they grow, how they seed, like almost dissecting every biological detail and understanding everything that is behind the growth of a plant. So when it came down to him painting it, he wouldn't just take like, oh, I'm gonna paint hundreds of roses, and they all are gonna look the same. They're all gonna be fully bloomed, like every artist would do during that era. No, he would paint like a bush with roses, and then some of them would be dead, some of them would be smaller, some of them bigger, some of them would,
Yeah.
slight color changes, how they would look in reality, because his observation would tell him to do it that way. When he was
Yeah.
asked to do wings for, I don't remember whatever it was, a sculpture or painting, uh, the first thing he would do, he would go to a local market and buy pigeons, and then sketch pigeon wings for like months, and try to understand the mechanic, how the wings actually work.
I mean, yeah, he was great at doing, well, like today we'd call that the deep dive, right?
Yeah, the deep research.
So I think, in order to start that deep dive, you have to have curiosity.
Yeah,
And if you don't have the curiosity to do the deep dive, don't expect to be a master of something,
yeah, that's true.
because it's going to take a lot of work. And
Yeah.
if you're not fully engaged, you're not going to put in the time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's funny because you might think, huh, like what is the reason for me to read a book about, biology of seeing? I mean, I only want to use it for this one project. You'll be surprised. Like the curiosity that brings you the ideas that you learn from looking at things in the very, like as you say, in the deep dive,
Yeah.
is that you're becoming curious about a lot of other aspects, and you're almost becoming sort of like a life
Yeah, exactly.
which
Yeah.
makes you which makes much easier to actually be better designer at the end, because a lot of the things that, if you look at illustration, you can tell, or some people can tell, all right, this is a great illustration or great design versus this is just a mediocre one. And a great designer will tell you exactly why. It's because this person did a research and he went in a deep dive and look at
Yeah.
all the aspects of what makes this design great. An average person will say like, I don't know, I just like it because it's better. You know what I mean? And
Well, you have to be able to do both, right?
yeah,
Because you're doing world building, so you need to create and invent everything in the world. And you want to appeal to people that will recognize things that are done well, and you want it to appeal to the people that look at it and go, oh,
Yeah.
that's badass, right? So you need both. You need it to be simple and immediately identifiable as something cool, and also well thought out
Hmm.
for the people that really are interested in, the deeper narrative.
Yeah, I agree. It's not an easy task. It's just like,
No,
but it's
no, no.
it's it's a journey. It's like you're building those experiences over time, and
Yeah,
eventually, eventually you get to a point like, oh, okay, like I understand enough things to actually make sense out of it. Like for me, for instance, I'll tell you this: when we started to learn Squared, one of the ideas we had was, professionals learning from one another, just to show that we, as professionals and professional artists, we're also human beings and we make big mistakes too. So when I would take a class of a photography class, for instance, from Jingya Zhang, she's an amazing artistic photographer. What 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 kind of changed in the way I personally view in the way I design my images and the way I work in 3D is that now I don't think as a 3D camera or 3D lighting or anything like that. I'm thinking, all right, this is my 35 millimeter camera with 21 millimeter lens. I'm using softbox, which is represented by, 2 by 4 feet light node, right?
yeah,
And I'll put it in a box that looks like a soft box, and if I want to diffuse it, I'll put something in front of it as a diffuser as well. So I'm almost thinking in the way that photographer would think about designing a scene.
yeah, yeah. That's how I model. I always just build it as it would be built,
Right.
the
And what
entire
it
scene.
does, it actually creates that finite difference between just the lighting that looks good on the model versus something that kind of looks similar to what it would look like if it was photographed.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of like an epiphany that I had with this. All right, let's jump into, maybe let's get one or two more questions and then we
Okay.
can wrap it up. Is that fine with you?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not in a hurry.
Cool. All right, Scott, how do you
My Gumroad
view?
tutorial can wait to get uploaded.
No, we cannot wait. People are waiting. Give me that tutorial. All right, let's jump in the next one. Scott, how do you view drawing, painting? Is it just one of the tools for presentation? In that sense, if a designer can be extremely good in 3D and could compensate with that continues. It doesn't seem like it's a finished question.
Basically,
Um,
it was the question: can they get away only doing 3D models if they
I
can't
guess
draw?
that's what it's implying. It's, do you consider drawing and painting as a tool for a design versus like, can I just draw or paint, or can I just do 3D and still consider myself a designer? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I know people that do 3D only. It will potentially doesn't. You're still visualizing and building three-dimensional forms, whether you're drawing it, painting it, or modeling it. I
Right.
don't think there's a difference, but
Or actually, there is a continuation of this question I found out. All right, let me quickly read it to you.
yeah,
In that sense, if a designer can be extremely good in 3D and could compensate with that continuous instead of having extreme drawing, painting skills, would that still be a good thing? Is it then also important for an industrial designer to be able to make stuff physically, use physical tools?
yes. So I would say that the reason it's so important. I'll do the industrial design side first, then we'll tackle the 3D
Mm-hmm.
question.
Sure.
So the reason it's so important to build physical models for, I think, for concept artists and designers as well as industrial designers is that it's so easy to fake things in the digital world that if you don't know how to build things for real, you really can't properly design it in the digital world either. So somehow you've got to learn how to build things, right? So
Yeah.
you're not going to learn it only building digital models. somehow, someday, they've got to become 3D in the physical world, our world, for you to really understand what you were doing in the 3D modeling program. If it stays digital, it's not, it's just a looks like model, right? I mean, which is
Yeah.
totally fine in a video game. But if you ever want to make a toy out of it or a physical prop for a movie, there's a big jump that you need to make. And the way you make that is starting to build things physically.
Yeah, maybe VR painting is going to be in the future sort of like a better bridge between
Yeah, it
both.
probably would be. Yeah, because you could almost see it there and touch it. You know, you can
Yeah.
relate to it much better. Yeah.
Or AR at that point. I don't know
Yeah, yeah.
what's gonna come first. That's curious. I mean, VR is already here, but I'm curious about AR itself because it's kind of like removing this big headset from your head.
Yeah. And then
That
on
could
the
be
other
interesting.
side, could you 3D model only? Yes, you could. And I know people that do that are good designers and they communicate all their designs via 3D.
Yeah.
The only thing that it may do is it may limit your employment opportunities.
Yeah,
And
that's
what I
true.
mean by that is that a
Unless you're
lot of,
Vitali.
yeah, a lot of places, yeah, unless you are a master, right? Then it's
Yeah.
totally different. But if you're the everyday, like junior designer, you want to have job opportunities in multiple studios, and you're just starting your career, one, you're going to be in competition with people that can draw and paint and model. Okay, so if I have a choice as an employer, and I'd have somebody who can do, they both do 3D models, but this person also can draw and paint, that's, you know, that's a competitive advantage. So you sort of have certain skill sets you just have to learn to be competitive with your colleagues. And then some departments, they don't want to see a 3D model as the first sketch. Like they want it to be looser. They want
Yeah.
it to be more an interpretation of the concept. Like they want a room of designers to see a loose sketch or a loose painting and read into that with their imagination. And a lot of times a 3D model will lack that ambiguity that other designers need when they're looking at an image to start to build on that image in more creative ways.
Yeah.
So let's say if you were 3D modeler only and you wanted to work on Star Wars, right, back in the day, Star Wars, the art department, they always did gray marker sketches every Friday, right? They had to do like a dozen a week or something, finished big 11 by 17 gray marker sketches. So if you can't do a gray marker sketch nicely drawn to share your initial ideas, you don't get to work on that project.
Yeah.
So I think you don't want to limit yourself. So I would just say, you know, better to learn them all.
Yeah, better to be sort of like generalist in a sense, and
Yeah,
then
as you
try to
age
find
and
your
you get older,
mastery. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you'll find the thing you love, you'll find the thing that you're best at, right? And then you'll start to gravitate to that. But really hard to get out and leave as, um, you know, a freelance specialist.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And in film, especially, like production designers and directors, they have their own sort of like favorite style of how they want to see things presented to them.
Yeah, totally.
And if you cannot do that, then you cannot work with them. That's as simple as that. So
Yeah, you're out. So you kind of need those skills.
yeah. Next question was: is it hard to keep balance between so many techniques and fundamentals? Should I jump between them all the time, or concentrate or on a single technique or fundamental for a long period of time?
Uh, well, you need to focus on the fundamentals until you master them to a proficient level. And the nice thing about the fundamentals, they are fundamentals. So they carry
Yeah,
over from figure drawing to environments to vehicles to props. It doesn't matter. It's just the basic communication tools. So in that regard, I don't think it's hard to balance at all because it's actually what I rely on all the time to switch different subject matters. Um, Now, the difficult part is the range is difficult. So what I mean by that is doing styling. Can you still see my screen?
yeah,
Okay, so say I'm doing something organic like this spaceship
mm-hmm.
or these ant ships versus something like this that's much more streamlined, right, and designed. So that's probably tougher to learn how to research quickly a different style and then adapt to being able to communicate that style in an attractive solution. But the thing I rely on to communicate that is the fundamentals. So I would say the fundamentals of drawing and rendering and showing form and material indication, all that stuff is constant.
Yeah,
And
I would
stays the
agree.
same. And what's totally awesome is if you master the fundamentals, you can bank on that, right? You can jump
Yeah,
into like any studio and you can have value because you can take, even if you don't have a good idea, other people have good ideas. And if they can't draw them, you can draw them,
yeah,
right? And
I
you can
agree.
show them to other people. You can also come in and do kick-ass painting on top of somebody else's 3D model, for instance, and you can get all the materials right. You can get the colors right, all of that. So I think um, I think the fundamentals are like what you bank on, basically. And then the hard thing would be the range of switching between different subject matters.
Yeah, I agree. Foundation is super important. It's just like, it's one thing to know all the tools and be able to render those amazing things, but eventually you might get stuck, you know? What if someone asks you to change things and like, oh, I don't have a foundation to do that anymore, so it's
Yeah.
that or nothing.
So I
it,
don't really see a balance. There's really, for me, it's always the same process.
yeah, I agree. All right, let's get one more and then we could wrap it up. Um, let's let's read that one. That could be actually interesting to hear your opinion. I'm learning towards Concept Design Academy, but I'm aware Art Center has a great reputation of its students in the industry. Should I stick to Art Center or go with Concept Art Academy?
Oh, that's like,
CDA is Kevin Chan, right?
yeah, I know. Kevin's one of my old teachers. Um, so, of course, I'm biased because I helped to start the entertainment design department at Art Center.
Of
Um,
course.
uh, I wrote the curriculum, so I know it depends. Can you?
Can you afford it?
Yeah, I would say if you can afford it, Art Center is still the best uh, all around, like super deep dive. You're going to join a room of 20 other individuals that are all like-minded and are super committed and are already really good. So if you want to be the best and you can afford it, even if you can't afford it, I would still try to go to Art Center because I gave students full tuition free scholarships when I was there.
Hmm.
So just because it's expensive doesn't mean you can't go for free.
Right.
Um,
That's
so
interesting. I didn't know about that at all.
yeah, there's a lot of scholarships available. So if you're really good and they really want you and you really need the money, you can actually get through that place paying zero tuition. So I would say try for there first. Now, if you can't get into Art Center, does it mean that you can't pursue this career? No. I mean, you can totally go out and learn other ways.
Like
What
I did.
you miss out, yeah, like you have, and lots of other students have that are now working professionally.
Yeah.
But here's what you miss. You miss being in a creative environment with a network or a group of students that are all like-minded, working for this towards the same goal. And so what I mean is on the front end, on the learning side, is that when everybody's working towards the same homework assignment, trying to master the same fundamentals, for instance, you learn a tremendous amount from the competition you have in the classroom.
Right.
You also are in a very much like a professional design studio environment where the teacher is much more like an art director or a production designer or a director. And you're having to present your work and build up a thick skin in presenting your work on a weekly basis for critiques from colleagues and your instructor. And that very much sets you up for psychologically being able to deal with that same scenario in the working world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you miss that on the learning side. And then on the networking side for getting jobs in the future, almost, if you go out 10 or 20 years, all your classmates are going to be running the studios that you want to work for. They're all going to be the future production designers, future directors, that sort of thing. They're all
Yeah.
going to be your friends. So the friendships you build in that network are really pay dividends for the whole rest of your career.
Yeah,
So I
that's one
think
of the
that
things I've been missing,
you
not being
can't
able
get
to
that.
do
You
that. Yeah,
know,
exactly.
I shouldn't say you can't get it. It's harder to get.
Yeah,
You can go to Brainstorm School. You can go to Concept Design Academy, Red Engine. Oh, there's a bunch of small schools around now.
learn
They all do good
squared.
work. Yeah, exactly. They
Shameless
all
plug.
do. Yeah, you guys are all doing good stuff. But there's something to be said for the live environment of you know actual 20 bodies showing up to the same space and putting their work on the wall on a weekly basis.
Yeah,
That's really difficult to replicate, and also the sense of community when you leave, that you can't really bank on that. It's also tough. So that's why I think a physical school still has an advantage over an online education. But is the online education providing you with skill sets and tools you can use to get a job? For sure. Like
yeah,
you can totally take classes from you, or you could read my two, like how to draw and how to render, watch all the videos, and you can get like 80% of the way there. And that may qualify you for 80% of the jobs.
mm-hmm.
But it's the last 20% of those jobs that you sort of need to know someone. Those are the tough ones to get.
Yeah. From my personal experience, I can say that well, networking is obviously more difficult if you just learn from home and you're not in that environment of students where your friends are gonna work for studios, gonna work for directors. They're gonna recommend your work if you're good, you know,
Yep.
and you're gonna get jobs much easier that way. But also being in your own, like being left to your own devices, there's a trap to it as well, which everyone has to understand, which is you have to be extremely self-disciplined.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
It's very difficult because you have to really focus on the fact that you pretty much have to do much more work than a person that's already guided of what they need to do in order to progress in their skill sets. You have to do your own research how to progress in the first place, and then be really really motivated and really self uh, like concentrate on making sure that that's happening for you, you know, like you're learning the right things and you're focusing enough time on them, because every minute that you're not doing that, it's a minute wasted that someone else has already guided how to do, and they're becoming better and better in that
Yeah.
same amount of time, you know. So it's like, sure, you're paying a lot of money, but you're removing a lot of headache out of the way because you're already getting a guidance
That's
on
why I
how
say,
to do things.
yeah, if you can afford it and you can get in, I would go there. Even if you can't afford it, I would still try to go there.
Yeah.
um, and then
Sure.
does it mean that if you don't get in, you're done and you can never work in this
Nope.
industry? No, hell no. You can totally do it. But it's gonna be a little tougher, and you're not
Yeah.
going to have this sort of support system there.
Yep. I would agree 100%. Cool. Let's wrap it up right here. I think we had a pretty good run. We've been talking for over an hour and 20 minutes now, so that's good. Dude, thanks for having your time and sharing it with us here on
Sure.
the Art Cafe, and sharing some of your knowledge. I've been always big fan of what you've been doing, your work, your teaching, and you know, one of the inspirations for me to actually become an artist.
Oh,
So,
thanks.
so my personal thank you, and really wonderful just to have you actually to have a conversation with you, and be able to share it with our listeners. So
No, it's fun. I haven't been very active online for actually like the last couple of years, because until just the last 3 weeks, just because of my schedule. So,
right, yeah,
all
you've been
top
always
secret
busy.
nature of stuff.
Top secret.
Yeah, it's fun.
Top secret stuff. All right, let's wrap it up here, guys. And again, thanks Scott for being here with us, and
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was
thanks for
fun.
everyone who joined us live. And I'll talk to you guys and see you guys online next time. And if you missed it and you have actually watching it later on, you can still do that. This video is going to be available right after it ends, so you can always rewatch it if you missed any of that. So awesome. All right. Take care, guys, and peace out. Till the next time.
All right. Bye bye.